everybody. Um, Today we've gathered to discuss a very critical matter and a very pertinent topic this day, and it's about youth empowerment. Now, in our quest to create sustainable solutions in our world, there is a great need to mainstream young people. There is a dear need to mainstream young people because there is a need to synergize efforts all over the world. There's a need for us to synergize and synchronize our efforts in addressing global issues such as hunger, poverty, and many issues that have bedeviled our societies. And so there is a need for us to look into this matter today. In our last month conference, we had the Global Youth Dialogue. We were privileged to have great personalities on our platform, such as Anne Molin, the founder of the Hack for Earth Foundation, and also the global director of the United Nations SDSN Youth, in person of Brighton Kilmer, and many other young persons that came around to share their thoughts and experiences. And it's still on the youth empowerment issues. And so there is a great need for us to empower young people. And today we are greatly privileged to have so many people with us today. Many people are still coming. I took a look at the registration form a few days ago, and I saw many people from different parts of the world, from Grenada, from India, from Argentina, and many other countries, even within Africa, because of our passion to see that our world and our society becomes better. And so I welcome everyone this morning to this great event. And also we are so privileged to have with us great personalities, distinguished personalities that are well skilled and knowledgeable on this subject matter of scaling Africa's productivity through youth empowerment. First of all, permit me to honor our keynote speakers. The first person is Professor Ngozi Odiaka, the co-director of Sustainable Development Solution Network and Nigeria region. She's also a professor of crop production in the University of Agriculture, Makurdi, Benue State in Nigeria. And we are so privileged to have her. I could remember last time she came to our program at the African Youth Emerge sometime in June, and it was a massive event. And so we are also thrilled to have with us today Ms. Chi Okafor. She's also a wonderful and an amazing global leader. She is the co-chair of the Oxford African Conference, and also the chairperson of the Oxford Women Leadership Alliance. And she is the founder of the Kendake Honey, a massive social enterprise that is making impact right here in Africa. And we are so privileged to have these great personalities with us. And I can't forget, we have great and an amazing team of panelists among us today, in the likes of Mr. Solomon Ogbaji, a great financial coach. He is a graduate of electronics and electrical and electronics engineering, and also he's a great businessman and an entrepreneur. And also we have with us today, who will soon be joining us, Mr. Emmanuel Sika, the founder of the Youth Initiative for Economic Empowerment, a great and an amazing African youth. And when I heard of his exploits some months back, I was so amazed. He has been able to help many young people, I think about 1,000 young persons, to get employed. And so we are privileged to have him here today. We also have with us, joining us soon, Mr. David Ichaona, a great African youth also. He is a business developer. He has helped many persons. He has worked with many organizations and helped many young persons in starting up businesses, and they are doing fine. He has been privileged to manage so many business projects, and they've been all successful. And so we are so happy to have him here with us. And finally, I can never forget my own friend, Miss Louise Adiku. Yes, she is the president, the team lead of the Enactus in the University of Agriculture, Makurdi. She just handed over, and we are so privileged to have her with us. She's also a member of the STEM, and also she's into entrepreneurship. And we look forward to having a very promising time today. So I welcome us once again to this amazing section. It promises to be a very, very wonderful event. And shortly before I call up our keynote speakers, permit me to share with us the modalities for this event. We immediately after this section, we will be having our keynote speakers. Yeah, we'll be inviting them individually to come share their thoughts and their experiences on how we can scale up the productivity of Africa, the productivity of young persons through youth empowerment, and very, very importantly, the growth of Africa is the growth of our world. So this is not just an African event, it's actually a global event. And also, immediately after the keynote section, we'll go to our panel discussion where we'll have discussions on youth empowerment, discussions on cryptocurrency, on business development, on employment, and other areas. And so it's going to be a really an amazing section. So thank you very much. And so, ladies and gentlemen, without taking much of our time, permit me to welcome on board the co-chair of the Oxford Africa Conference, and also who is also the chairperson of the Oxford Women Leadership Alliance, in person of Ms. Chi Okafor. Hello, Ms. Chi Okafor.
Hello, thank you very much for having me.
Would you mind turning on your camera?
Yeah, I was just going to say that unfortunately I'm unable to turn my camera on because it says the host has not given me access to do so. So
okay.
The host would need to stop to figure that out. Also, there we go. Thank you very much. Also, I think it's important to note that I was the co-chair of the Oxford Africa Women Conference and the Oxford Africa Women in Leadership Alliance. I'm actually just finished my tenure as I've graduated this year, but will always remain the founder and CEO of Kendake Honey, which in my opinion is of equal importance. So thank you very much for having me here today, and I hope that from our conversations and discussions today that we're able to bring about implementable solutions that can be shared both now and in the future for African youth to be able to accommodate. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much, ma'am. And before we delve into our topic of discussion for today, would you mind telling us a bit about the Oxford African Conference initiative for the benefit of those that may just be hearing about the conference?
Yeah, sure. So I'm sure you've all heard of Oxford University. The Oxford University is a prestigious university that's been around for 1,000+ years now, a center of excellence and tradition, and that sort of esteems education and the academic experience at the highest sort of standard. The Oxford Africa Conference is where Africans who, both those who study at Oxford and don't, come together to discuss the issues on ground in Africa and the best ways to kind of combat that. So it's the largest convening on Africa and Europe, actually. This just outgoing year, and if you go onto YouTube now, you'll be able to see some of the interviews with, again, fantastic personalities that we had on the continent who are doing great work and are striving to be able to, sort of change some of the issues that we face. We, decided that the narrative, myself and my co-chair, we decided the narrative would be rewriting the African story. And asserting Africa's future. And I think it's extremely important and timely to use this pandemic, where actually across the globe, people are building back better, but also looking at rewriting and re-establishing their narratives. And that also Africa joins in on that. And an example of that is that you can see, for example, COP26, where, the world has come together to see a massive issue that's affecting us, that's climate change, and the best ways to combat that. So we're at a point where people are really trying to overturn issues or mistakes that they've made in the past. And I think, Africa should join in on that bandwagon and look at how to change that. So that was kind of the basis of the narrative, this outgoing year. So we had conversations with, like I mentioned, great people who are doing fantastic work across the continent, instead of focusing on discussing the very many problems that we all know plague Africa, particularly within youth. So the youth unemployment status, for example, the informal versus the formal sector, etc. We were looking at, okay, what are you doing in your own sectors to be able to tackle this, and how best can it be replicated across the African continent? So it is literally a conference. I encourage absolutely everyone to get involved. If you know people who are doing fantastic things, please send them my way and I'll forward them over to the current committee to be able to kind of connect, so that we can have these discussions and keep it going forward, because it is these discussions that keep these conferences alive.
All right. Thank you so much, Ma, for that explanation on Oxford African Conference. And sorry if I may ask, is it an event that holds every year, or is it something that is just for 2021?
No, this is an event that is held every year and has held years before I came about being the chair. Predominantly, it is usually held in person, actually. But of course, given what happened, where everyone was kind of switching things to virtual, we had the opportunity to have the first virtual conference. Now, I do know that there are conversations because of the kind of impact and the reach that we had from the conference, I do know that there are conversations to making sure that the virtual aspect of it is something that's channeled in, in now that we've kind of lifted up the restrictions here in the UK. So I really, again, like I said, encourage people to get involved. As you know, knowledge and knowledge transfer is not the only, but the most important way to be able to tackle issues in your respective communities. So it's, again, a great space for conversation and discussions on solutions, advancing your network, increasing access to funding for your respective ventures, etc. So I do encourage people to get involved in that regard.
All right. Thank you so much, Ma, for that. And quickly, I would love to ask. Now, today we are considering youth empowerment. We are looking at how young people in Africa and all over the world can be empowered and become economically independent. Looking at the trends of poverty that has bedeviled our world. And so, can you tell us possible ways in which young people can scale up their businesses as an entrepreneur, which you are, and as someone that is in the field for several years?
Yes, sure. Thank you very much for that. I think to start off, I did a TED talk about a year ago now. So I kind of encourage all of you maybe to have a look at that at some point. I'll share the link here as well later on. And the reason why I mentioned that is that it will help you better understand my journey and my story, to being committed to and dedicated to sort of the African narrative and, building Africa. But, if you have had a look at it, and when you do have a look at it, you'll understand how much importance I place on statistics and numbers. So I'd just like to quickly start off the conversation before I get onto your question by kind of sharing these statistics to understand the status. So, you know, Africa from 1950 to the present time, Africa's population has grown steadily, outnumbering Europe to reach 1.3 billion in 2020. It now represents the second largest population as a whole compared to other world regions, preceded only by Asia. The continent's population is already the fastest growing in the world and will remain so until 2100, when it is expected to reach 4.3 billion. So with a median age of about 19.7 years in 2020, Africa's population is already the youngest in the world. 60% of the entire continent is aged below 25, making it the youngest continent in the world in relation to, you know, its population makeup. The youth of Africa constituted to 19% of the global youth population in 2015, numbering 226 million. And by 2030, it is predicted that the number of youth in Africa will have increased by 42%. Just to kind of, you know, hone in on specific countries, Niger, which has the world's youngest population, half of Niger's population is 14 years or younger, and the median age is 15. So that's extremely, extremely young. You know, looking at Nigeria, because I know we have Nigerians on this call and within this committee and network, Nigeria's current population is 200 million and is expected to double over the next 30 years. The youth of the population has tripled in 40 years and is currently expected to increase, where every 1 out of 3 African youths will be Nigerian on the continent. So, I mean, that's immense pressure and responsibility on Nigerian youths to shape the narrative on Africa's status moving forward. Sort of looking at Kenya, because again, I know you mentioned that the hub is made up, split between sort of predominantly Nigeria and Kenya. Kenya's labor force, which is 15 to 64, accounts for about 57%, and the youth constitutes to 29% of the total population. So we're seeing a common thread here where, you know, the youth are, if not already, fast becoming the majority of their respective sort of the population in the respective countries. And this is kind of a common thread. So on sheer population size alone that the youth kind of cover, they are integral to the advancement of Africa. It is extremely important that we are investing, empowering, focusing on educating our youth and having these discussions. The responsibility for Africa to move forward and become a global player, literally, quite literally, as you've seen, lies in our hands. And, you know, just because of the fact that, you know, we're looking at an expectation of Nigerian youth ratio to increase to 1 out of every 3, I can also say, you know, in Nigerian youth's hands, right? So that's just on the basis of what I wanted to get from that, is for us to understand why we're having this conversation in the first place. That on a, you know, it's from the size of, you know, what the youth take up within the population. You know, it really is important for us to be having these talks. So, and I mean, from the title alone, you gave this discussion, upscaling Africa's productivity through youth empowerment. I presume that you already knew this, and it seems that you also, you know, understand and appreciate the importance that youth have in establishing and growing Africa's as a whole in every sector. Now, you know, the argument really, you know, some people, as in every conversation, there are pessimists and there are optimists. And, you know, there's a lot of contention amongst critics and analysts about what the youth demographic dividend can actually mean for Africa. Some people believe, obviously, with the correct governance, the economy could significantly grow and develop, to achieving that status of becoming a global player, while others argue that if we continue, which I'm going to say is if we continue with this sort of poorly managed youth, who constitute to the majority of the population, and we're overlooking their skill set, overlooking the importance of the things that they can offer, and not educating them, then we're looking at, greater instability and possibly civil conflict. And so I feel like that's why I'm extremely committed to conversations like this one that we're having today. And, without overriding, Melchizedek, your structure for the today's discussion, I would encourage maybe in the comment section for us to, throw questions, ideas, and as I'm going along, just so that we are actually having a dialogue, and I'm learning from you, and you're also learning from me on how best to advance the nation forward. Now, specific to your question, how exactly can young people scale up their businesses in Africa? I'm taking out the time to kind of write down some hard truths, and so I'll sort of get into that and share that with you. So my first thing that I put down is start, right? And this is relevant to wherever you are in the world, the UK, the West Indies, Nigeria, India, whatever, Kenya, just start. I can't tell you how many times I've sat down with so many youth and young people, and they've talked about, their business ideas, these fantastic ideas. And these are, usually with some level of social impact, even if they're, at the basis of it, it's talking about looking at employing, hundreds and hundreds of people. Why is that important? Just to kind of throw that back into the, specifically to Nigeria and Kenya, Nigeria has the highest unemployment rate for youth and women at 27% and 30% respectively. The unemployment rate of young people in Kenya increased in the first quarter of 2021 compared to its previous quarter. And the age group between 20 and 24 years, the rate stood at 16.3%, up 15% from Q4 in 2020. So there's obviously, an issue in that regard. So even by the sheer idea of you running a business, we're no longer talking about it being a social enterprise or having this massive, large social impact, which I think a lot of people, acts as a hindrance for them to start, because they think, what's different about my business? From the basis of you just starting and employing 2 people, you are reducing those statistics and impacting Africa in that way. So just start. As I was saying, I've spoken to so many youth who have fantastic ideas, life-changing businesses. And then when I, speak to them or check up with them 2 to 3 years down the line, they still haven't started. They're either, quote unquote, putting the business plan together, or, there's one reason or another as to why they haven't started. So I would say start. That's the first thing. You start scared, you start unsure, you start to fail, because you will, but in true entrepreneurial fashion, just start. The second thing I put down was write it down. So at this point, you should have a plan or a business plan of projection. So, as to where, theoretically speaking, you would want your business to go or your venture to go. And I think planning is extremely essential, especially in the climate that we are in Africa, where, the world for once got to feel what it's like doing business in Africa with this pandemic. How unpredictable the climate can be. We're still quite, business and politics are intertwined almost. As you climb the sort of the ladder, you come to find how important it is to leverage, any political sort of network that you may have, because of the way in which Africa runs. And with those the instability in politics also affects business. So there's so much, it is an unpredictable market, and the ease of business is poor. So planning is key to doing business in Africa. I mean, planning is key, full stop, but planning is essential to doing business on the African continent. Also, documenting your journey. And what do I mean by that? You know, like many things, you know that theory is very different to practical. Even if given, you know, again, going back to my scientific background, even if you are doing a series of trials, you always start off with a hypothesis, which is your theory, what you think is going to happen. And then you run a series of tests and you're given your conclusion of what actually happened, right? And usually, depending on what stage and level and, you know, space you are testing, sometimes your hypothesis is correct and sometimes it's not. So documenting your journey is essential, so that you are able to you know, look back in hindsight and see how, you know, determine business growth, which will help you project your business growth in the future. It allows you to know the mistakes that you've made and how to counter them in the future. It allows for you to, you know, document the growth, the journey. Super important. That's been really helpful for me. And also it allows for you to look back and have a review and see over the course of the year to see, okay, you know, is this actually working? Do we need to diversify our business? Do we need to change our target audience? Do we need to, you know, upscale on this date? Are we ready for an upscale? What is needed to upscale? Document your journey, super important. So which leads me to my next point, adaptability. As I mentioned, Africa is inundated in complexities with an extremely low ease of doing business. For example, in Nigeria, and I can speak for this from experience, it can take up to 12 months to just register a business, compared to the UK where it can take 12 hours. And this literally happened to me. That's why I've used the 12, because the same business took me 12 hours to register here in the UK, but it took me 12 months in Nigeria. So the ease of business isn't where it is supposed to be. So remaining adaptable, you know, administrations come and go, you know, laws come and go. Right now, for example, this was a big hindrance for us at one point because the registration of new business SIMs. Those that are Nigerian, you'll know that there was a new recent law passed where new SIM registrations were not allowed, and for business purposes, and we needed new registrations, SIM registrations to be given. As you can imagine, local rural farmers some of them don't have phones and access to phones. So we, you know, part of the process to make sure that we're connected to them and we're, you know, checking up on things when for example, when I'm not in the country, you know, we need to be registering SIMs, and this was something that we weren't able to do. So that was a massive hindrance, but that is part of, you know, doing business in Africa. What did we do? We looked at employees within our organizations who had one or more free phones that they weren't using, which is usually the case. And in the interim, we've been operating that way, where those who don't have SIM registrations are using that. So remain super adaptable. Also remain super adaptable in your plan. How can I relate that to an example? You know, the Nigerian market is only and again, as I mentioned earlier, it'd be really helpful if you could have a look at the TED talk I did, because it explains like my business sector. So I'm into the production, processing and packaging of organic honey. I have farms across Nigeria, including Oyo State, Enugu, Nasarawa. For example, we as I mentioned, do the whole value chain, but we utilize this value chain to empower youth and women specifically. And we do this alongside associated initiatives by training, donating agricultural inputs to the hives, etc., giving them the right training to know how to harvest up to the harvesting product point. And then we offtake their products at economically fair prices. So looking at the stated global market price, you know, in dollars. So the idea is sustainable income generators, another opportunity for people to be able to sustain their families and their respective homes. A lot of NGOs have come over, and usually they, you know, will do the same sort of model. But of course, you can imagine they have tenures, so they have a 5-year contract. And so they'll educate and train these women on various agricultural inputs, all the youth, blah, blah, you know, training them the same sort of thing. And then when their tenure leaves, they up and go. And so what you have is educated on women and youth on how to effectively harvest the hive or effectively grow, you know, your tomatoes, etc., with no access to market. So they still remain poor, because you can imagine the cost of moving goods from their rural environments because of the poor infrastructure into any towns or markets is limited. So and that's where we come into play. We actually are providing the education and the market access, which in turn helps to fuel and run the business. And so why I mentioned that is, you know, when in terms of being adaptable, I can easily, you know, speak about that now, but this business model, it took time for us to be able to fine tune it this way. I'm sure you can imagine how difficult it is transporting honey from, you know, Oyo, anyone who's from Nigeria, Erua, Kefi, and Enugu to a central point. Just you know, revealing that part alone, I'm sure you can imagine how much complexities we find across the way. So remaining adaptable to environment is extremely important. Your business plan will change dependent on certain times. Again, the pandemic is a great example of that. How many people have had to diversify business, move into new business spaces, change their target audience, export maybe when they were only focused on local, change or expand or, you know, merge their supply chains because of, as a response to the pandemic. Remaining adaptable is important to survive in the business environment in Nigeria. Mentorship. So I'll be extremely honest and transparent. I actually only grasped the real importance of mentorship and guidance quite recently. I've had fantastic mentors all my life, and, you know, who just being around them motivated me. And I didn't realize this at the time. I'm telling you, you know, as years have passed, I'm like, oh, okay, this was actually quite helpful. The motivation, because, you know, that these people are motivated in their own respective areas, so it motivates you. They shaped how I see the world. They shape what I deem to be important, and this is both consciously and subconsciously. So mentorship is extremely important. I would say that you should be extremely guarded and intentional about who you allow to speak in your life in general, but, you know, with being specific to the business environment, it is an important thing. It's mentorship. Selecting the right mentor it's not a process that you rush, as well, because one wrong word is the wrong turn, which means business failure. So being intentional with selecting your mentors, and, you know, because of how we are as Africans, you know, again, this is a common theme. A beautiful part of our culture is that we respect our elders, right? And we place an importance of our elders being, you know, sort of above us as youth. But I'll have to say that, and I want to say this in a very PC way, in that sometimes, you know, there can be youth tend to be more innovative, and as the world is becoming moving into the already moved into the technological phase, these are where maybe our elders don't really have that much understanding, and where we can kind of really provide the right kind of knowledge. And I'll give you an example of exactly what I'm trying to say here. So I'm sure you guys have heard of the Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, right? These three guys, and Alexander the Great, these three guys understood the importance of knowledge transfer. And there is a philosophy that's used by the way in which they operated in mentorship programs today. So essentially, as an individual, you should have somebody that you look to, preferably older than you, doesn't necessarily have to be, but definitely more experienced than you are, able to guide you. They have to be ahead of you in whatever respective space, to provide you the knowledge that you need to move forward, right? And then you should have someone younger or less experienced behind you to which you are passing that knowledge transfer to, so you're teaching, right? And I think In those 3 phases, us being in the middle, there is a transfer of knowledge that happens between the 2. You should also be, if your mentor is older than you and is guiding you in a certain way, you should also be able to be well read enough, and because you're teaching someone behind, to be able to transfer knowledge to them as well. So, and I find it that when I say this, because of the way our culture is, which I respect greatly, I do think that people think it might be disrespectful to be teaching your elders, or uncommon or unheard of, but it's not. It's not. Again, I've used the example of technology. You can see what's happening in the tech sector between Nigeria and Kenya. I put down some statistics as well. Nigeria is the most funded market, followed by Kenya and Egypt. Together, the 3 accounted for 60% of the total equity funding for African startups. And that African, technology sector has thrived over the last decades, but it's predominantly controlled by youth, right? And this is a great escape from Africa's poverty, this sector alone. But the elder population are not as well versed with that. So would we say, because of that, we should have leaders who don't really know how to drive that sector forward, keep our youth away from it, just so that we are respecting culture? It's essentially the point that I'm trying to put forward there. So, like I said, mentorship, extremely important. Ensure that you are specific with selecting. You have the power to select as well who will guide you, as well as who you're learning from. So be very intentional with that knowledge transfer. Number 5, networks. Networks are everything, really, in business, in politics, in anything in life. Your network is your net worth, literally. So, investing in the right network. This hub, for example, the Innovators Hub, is a fantastic place to enhance your network. What do we talk about when we're advancing our network? Even for the idea of, and I'll give you an example for what's happened with us. So at Kendake Honey, when I say network as well, people always think that means like, strive for the top and be involved in Oxford and be involved in the highest points. Yes, definitely, you should be looking at advancing your networks and expanding your networks, and they should, on the up, but also on the down too. So for example, in any business, in any organization, your team is everything. Without the right team, you don't have a successful business, or even if you have a stagnant business, it will be difficult for you to grow with the wrong team. And so getting involved in networks, which is how we were able to do it, where they provide employment, or they train the right kind of employees that you can take on to involve in your business, right? So the network is not necessarily only financial growth, moving on the up. That means moving on the down too, because you need both parties. So networks are essential. The next point is investment and funding. Of course, that goes without saying. In order to timely and efficiently scale your business, you do need injection of funding at some point, be it at the start, be it, as you got into, Series A, B. So again, how are we doing this? This is where your mentor comes into play. Accessing your mentor's network. If there's somebody that are either or, older than you, more experienced in this field that you're doing, more connected, more advanced, in tech, whatever it may be, advanced. So that's why I said about being specific about selecting your mentor and your mentees as well. So that, leveraging that. The next thing, as well, as I said, is managing your network. Again, going back to experiences that I've had, and I'll give you an example. So one day, I had there was a specific cafe that we supplied honey to, and so I sat down. I was just kind of looking through numbers. It's a really nice cafe as well. So I was having a coffee, and a gentleman, sat across the table from me. So we just naturally started talking. So he asked me what I did, blah blah blah, and so I told him, I am the founder and CEO of this organization, and kind of relayed what I was doing, and didn't speak to him again from that point for another 1.5 years, maybe. So 2 years later, I'm at a business event, the Tony Illuminati Foundation event in Abuja specifically. And I'm just walking and I hear somebody say, "Oh, that's the girl that I was telling you about." So I turn my head and see this same gentleman that I haven't seen for 2 years. And he's talking to the convener of the TEDx experience, right? And this is literally how the experience of me speaking, having a TED talk came about. I then introduced myself, and then, the rest is history. And so when I talked about networks, necessarily, he wasn't necessarily, I wouldn't say he was, someone who was miles ahead of me and out of reach and all of that. But he became part of my network, because I took the time and invested in that conversation, and shared what I was doing, and he also shared what he was doing, and he really believed in it and held on to it for 2 years. So you can imagine how important it is to talk about networking. And why do I mention that at this interim? Because of that TED Talk, that allows me to easily access funding. Because when I want to have a conversation, I literally copy a link, send it over to you. You listen to about 15 minutes to know what exactly it is I'm doing in my business. And then you're able to support because you've understood. So it's like you can see the domino effect that's happening here, right? And I think that's really important to share. And also within for investing and funding as well, talk about what you're doing at every single point. You meet someone on the road, "Hi, hello, how are you? What's your name? What do you do?" Talk. I did that the other day. I just came back from Abuja not long ago, 2 days ago, and I was on the at the airport. We were waiting for our bags. Someone who's doing fantastic work within Nigeria as well shared what they were doing. I shared what I was doing. Don't know this person from Adam, and we're looking at sort of partnering and collaborating moving forward. Share what you're doing moving forward. So I think it's important to discuss as well what are investors looking for? Numbers, right? As I mentioned from the beginning, both from a scientific perspective, being a pharmacist, and also, doing my MBA at Oxford, numbers are everything. You can't argue with numbers. That's the beauty of it. You can argue with perspectives, you can argue with viewpoints, you can argue with plans and projections, but you can't argue with financial numbers that's, of your current business status and where you plan for them to go. That is the main thing that your investors are looking for. If you can't do, financial projections, please do look for someone that can help you with that. That is the most important part. Of course, the next step is having a sound business plan specific to your region. So it should incorporate how you plan to tackle political instability, movement of administrations, outbreaks. Those things should be incorporated in how your business will be able to tackle and stand within those times. And then also business plans. Some of the business plans I've seen that I should be able to. It should essentially be what is in your head on paper, but I should be able to follow it step by step. Q1 of 2022, we plan to do A. Q2 of 2022, because of what we've done in A, we plan to do B. The numbers will be our turnover for this year will be blah, 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 X amount, right? Make it clear so that we can actually follow it with you. The very minute that an investor, and bear in mind, these funding organizations get thousands of applications. The very minute they see something they can't follow, they throw it away because it's because of time, right? So people need to be able to follow your business plan. And something else that is, really hard, especially if you have a startup, be receptive enough to feedback, but be sturdy enough to believe in your vision. Remember why you started, right? Sometimes I have to go back to some of the things that I documented however many years ago when I was starting this journey, to remind myself of why I started. Very important. And then quite finally, and then, yeah, and I also wanted to encourage you, because there are so many funding opportunities for Africa right now. The world has, with different, shifts in economic markets, political status of countries and ties, etc., i.e. Brexit, people have understood the importance of investing in Africa. So I think it's extremely important to remember that there is that opportunity and that it exists. So be encouraged. Lastly, I don't want to keep it too much on our time. I know I've spoken a lot. No risk, no story. So for one second, I wouldn't even want you to think, and I think as well, this is from experience of speaking to African youth and having conversations, people presume that, it's got to be, listen to the way she speaks, it's been easy for her. Her story and my story are not the same thing. I'm just going to be very frank with, straightforward with you. I wouldn't want to sugarcoat this journey. It's only when I look back at and this was happened the other day, we applied for a certificate, that certifies your quality and taste. And we got one in 2019, but we were only able to achieve a bronze, which was a huge milestone for us at the time, but it was still only bronze. And we applied again in 2021 and we got the gold. So it wasn't till I was looking at an old label with this sticker and the new one that I realized, oh my goodness, look at this growth. When you're doing your day-to-day, because of the normal day-to-day operations and the complexities of Africa, that sometimes feels like, the resistance feels like, literally, why are you even trying at this point, right? It can be so discouraging sometimes. An example is we had a water, just last week, we had a water shortage. How do I run a processing unit, please? Somebody answered the question without water. Water is a basic amenity, please, so that I can, and it really affected our business. But, we, again, going back to being adaptable, we went to figure out how to get, clean water from a registered laboratory in another area, and asked them to supply us for that week to we could figure out our own water shortage. It cost us, but we had to keep on going. So, it's not easy. It really is not easy. So I want that and I think it's important that everyone knows that it's not easy for anyone, at wherever you come from. But just to kind of show you what we've had as well. Again, in my talk, I spoke about, we've had a fire outbreak on our farm where literally, fire was we set up, invested in a farm, and everything burnt down. So, finding innovative ways to adapt. I didn't realize how much of a risk it was to just, pick up and pack my bags and move to Nigeria and, say I'm starting a farm after the fact. I put everything on the line to start this farm. Personal funding, my time, my growth as well, because things are slower moving in Africa than they are in the western part of the world. But what I will say is that following this dream and remaining, I would say not just following, but remaining dedicated to this dream allowed for me the opportunity to fulfill a purpose. Through this, we've been able to empower more 2,500 youth and more, and counting. Starting this business, I would probably not be able to have had the opportunity to start this sort of business within the Western market. Why? Just from the sheer example that when we did buy our land, 1 hectare cost 250,000 naira, which equates to £500. I can promise you, you will never find a hectare of land worth that amount here in the UK. No way, right? Or any part of the Western world, okay? And that was attainable for me. We've won several awards for quality and taste of our product. We've been able to reach markets that I would never have dreamed of doing. Because of, based on my application to do an MBA at Oxford was literally about my business. I was able to fulfill that dream based on that. I've had spoken at so many, the UN, so many places, discussing what I'm doing as in Africa as a social entrepreneur. So the opportunities are the reward is there, but it is difficult along the journey. So, to close, no excuses, guys. You know, it's a hard pill to swallow when I say that, and I'm speaking to myself as well. Forget all the reasons why it won't work, because we'll be here all day. If we start to look at the reasons why it won't work, we'll be here all day. You either want it or you don't. It's so simple. No need to complicate that. And so, you know, it's hard for everyone as well. I think it's good to just kind of, you know, the way, because Africa's problems are so endemic, whether you're privileged or you're not privileged, whether you have all the money in the world or you have no little at all, whether you know, speak English or you don't, like the access to opportunities are still limited or affected, or resources as well are still affected, regardless of where you come from. But the idea is being committed to not giving up. And one thing I will say is that, you know, African youth are fantastic. They are so innovative. It is unreal. They are resilient. And I am extremely excited to watch us finally work together to empower and take Africa forward, to its rightful position on the international scale. So I think for me, it's a long-winded response to your question, but I think that's it from me. Thank you very much.